Hey guys, tonight we're slipping quietly into the heartbeat of a century that refused to sleep, the Harlem of the 1920s. A place so alive with sound, color, and energy that even the moon might have paused to listen. You probably won't survive this, in the sense that, by the end, your old idea of history might be completely reborn. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with your location and local time. I love seeing how far these midnight travels reach. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand at the edge of Manhattan as night folds itself around you. The year is somewhere between 1919 and 1925. The city smells of hot pavement and cheap perfume, of ink and ambition. You climb aboard a late train rumbling uptown. The windows shiver with the rhythm of jazz. It's not the tourist kind, it's raw, unfiltered, alive. The carriage sways, filled with people who've come north chasing the promise of work, dignity, and something even more elusive, freedom. The Great Migration, that's what historians call it. Millions leaving the Jim Crow South for cities like Chicago, Detroit, and here, Harlem. You can almost hear the unspoken hope between the tracks. A rhythm older than the saxophones that would soon make these streets sing. Families clutch suitcases filled with Bibles, photographs, and recipes from home. Kids stare out the window as the skyline sharpens against the night, their futures unwritten but shimmering. When you step off the train, the first thing that hits you is sound. A trumpet wails from a basement club, mixing with the gossip of street vendors and the laughter of poets half-drunk on gin and ideas. Someone's arguing about Marcus Garvey's speeches, someone else swears they saw Bessie Smith perform last night. The air feels thick, like it's vibrating with dreams too big for daylight. Harlem at this hour is a kind of magic that doesn't apologize. Every corner brims with contradiction, tenements packed tight with struggle, yet windows glowing with piano light and the scent of fried catfish. You pass a shoeshine stand where two men debate whether black art should be for us or for everyone. Historians still argue whether this was a Renaissance born from pride or a performance shaped by white curiosity, but for now, you just walk, letting the pulse of the city teach you its rhythm. A fringe tidbit: some residents joked that even the pigeons in Harlem could scat sing. It wasn't far from the truth. Rhythm lived in the air, from the shuffle of dancers to the echo of typewriters clacking out new worlds. You pause outside the Savoy Ballroom, where doormen in crisp uniforms guard a portal into another universe. Inside, couples glide in perfect sync, skirts twirling, brass blazing. You don't need a ticket, just imagination. Step closer and you can feel the floor tremble beneath your feet, not from noise but from the collective release of generations refusing silence. The city itself seems to wink at you, a place reborn nightly, a canvas painted in music, poetry, and laughter that hides sorrow underneath. Harlem doesn't promise happiness, it offers aliveness. And that's enough to make even the most tired soul start to sway. You lean back against a lamppost, watching smoke curl from a musician's cigarette as he packs up his trumpet. His eyes meet yours briefly, tired but proud. He nods, like he knows you understand. This isn't just music. It's history learning to breathe in syncopation. The train that brought you here has long gone, but you don't need it anymore. You're home now, inside a dream built by those who refuse to stop dreaming. You start walking again, slow, unhurried, as the streets of Harlem stretch before you like veins pulsing with warm light. Lenox Avenue hums, not with cars or chaos, but with conversation. It's past midnight, yet the sidewalks still bloom with life, women in flapper dresses leaning against brownstone railings, men in shiny shoes trading laughter and dreams under the dim glow of street lamps that flicker like half-awake eyes. Everywhere you turn, something glimmers. Not gold, but determination. You see shop windows stacked with books, hair salons doubling as meeting halls, and speakeasies hidden behind laundry doors. The city feels like it's performing, but not for applause. For survival. You pause outside a club called Small's Paradise. Inside, a singer's voice curls through the air like silk ribbon, mournful, sweet, and defiant. You can't quite catch the lyrics, But the tone alone tells you the story. Love lost, rent unpaid, hope still intact. There's something about the way she holds her note that makes you feel as if time itself is leaning closer to listen. But walk a few blocks further, and you'll see the other Harlem, the one that doesn't glitter under the spotlight. Families crammed into rooms meant for one, mothers taking in laundry while children sleep on folded coats. The Renaissance is a miracle, yes, but a selective one. While the papers call it a golden age, you can feel the weight of the truth, that art sometimes blooms brightest in the cracks. Historians still argue whether the movement was liberation or illusion, a bold act of cultural defiance or a show curated for white patrons downtown. But maybe it's both. Maybe it's the paradox that gives Harlem its beauty, a place where black excellence could roar even while the world tried to whisper it back into silence. You pass by a man sketching portraits on the curb. He's fast, confident, using only charcoal and paper. His fingers are stained, his shoes falling apart. When you ask how much, he shrugs, "Pay what you got." You hand him $1 and he laughs softly. "You from downtown?" "Don't matter. Harlem will teach you something." You nod, not yet sure what that something is. A fringe tidbit: by 1925, the average rent in Harlem had tripled, yet more people kept coming. Because here, for the first time, talent could matter more than lineage. There was a sense that anything, a poem, a sax riff, a photograph, could lift you out of invisibility. The night deepens. A man selling roasted peanuts hums along to a tune drifting from an open window. It's a trumpet solo, slow, deliberate, hypnotic. You realize the city isn't just alive, it's aware. It's watching itself evolve in real time. Harlem has become both stage and spectator, audience and actor. You lean against a brick wall covered in posters: "Rent party tonight, bring a dime." The edges flap in the wind. These parties keep roofs over heads and spirits high. In cramped apartments, strangers dance shoulder to shoulder, passing hat money to cover the landlord's knock. You imagine being there, laughter spilling into the hallway, shoes tapping in sync, the clink of bottles against the rhythm of hope. A scholar once called Harlem a dream deferred but not denied. And standing here, you finally understand what that means. The dream might wait, might stretch thin, might crack, but it never disappears. It lingers, shimmering in every trumpet note, every painted wall, every whispered prayer. You glance up and see the skyline breathing, tenements dark against the bruised blue sky, but windows glowing like embers refusing to die out. You can't tell if Harlem is asleep or wide awake. Maybe it's both. Maybe it's what happens when an entire people decide to dream with their eyes open. And as the clock edges past 2 a.m., you realize, this isn't just a neighborhood. It's a heartbeat dressed as a city. And you're standing inside its pulse. You follow that pulse deeper into the night, toward the sound of trumpets, laughter, and something electric you can't quite name. The closer you get, the thicker the air becomes, heavy with smoke, perfume, and possibility. A sign swings lazily above you, the Cotton Club. You've heard of this place, everyone has. But tonight, you're not looking for fame or faces. You're chasing the sound that changed everything: jazz. Inside, it hits you like a wave. The brass section ignites first, a shimmering explosion that melts into the soft rumble of the drums. The piano follows, playful, taunting. And then comes the horn, bending time, twisting sorrow into something strangely joyful. You stand at the back of the room, surrounded by a sea of rhythm, where even silence seems syncopated. There, under the spotlight, Duke Ellington's orchestra glows like gold in motion. Each musician moves as if the music itself is conducting them. Their eyes half closed, their suits glistening under the stage lights. Duke doesn't shout or command. He simply raises a hand, and the universe rearranges itself. You can't help but smile. This is the sound of a people reinventing freedom. Not through words or speeches, but through improvisation, each note breaking away from the last, yet somehow belonging. Jazz isn't just entertainment here, it's resistance disguised as elegance. You notice the crowd, all white faces at the tables, drinking in the spectacle. Because, yes, irony still breathes in the corners. black musicians creating brilliance for audiences barred from living next door. But you also sense the quiet rebellion underneath. This music isn't for them. It's bigger than that. It's Harlem speaking in a frequency the rest of the world can't quite translate. A fringe tidbit: some nights, Louis Armstrong would sneak into lesser-known clubs after his main gigs, still in tuxedo, still glowing with energy, just to jam with local kids until dawn. They called it chasing the ghost, that endless pursuit of the perfect solo no one could ever capture again. Historians still argue whether jazz emerged as a structured art form or pure accident, a collision of Southern blues, ragtime, and urban chaos. But in Harlem, you feel no debate, only certainty. This music belongs here. It belongs to the people who turned struggle into swing. You close your eyes, and the notes begin to paint: deep reds, honey golds, soft violet. Each trumpet cry feels like a confession, each drumbeat a heartbeat refusing to break rhythm. Somewhere, a couple dances cheek to cheek, swaying as if the world beyond these walls doesn't exist. Maybe, for tonight it doesn't. As the set ends, the audience erupts in applause, but the band barely looks up. They know applause isn't the goal, it's survival, expression, release. You slip back outside, the night air cool against your skin, and Harlem sounds different now. The city's heartbeat has become syncopated too, pulsing in time with the music still echoing in your chest. Down the block, a smaller bar buzzes, an after-hours joint where musicians trade riffs for drinks. You step inside and spot a man tapping his trumpet against his thigh, eyes half closed, humming something wild. It's not polished, it's raw. But it's truth. He notices you listening and nods. "Ain't about getting it right," he says, "it's about feeling it." You nod back, understanding without words. Because that's Harlem, a city where mistakes can be music and pain can swing. As dawn teases the edge of the skyline, you finally step back into the street. Your ears are ringing, but it's not unpleasant. It's like the city has tuned you to its frequency, a rhythm that will follow you long after the night fades. The jazz doesn't end when the club closes. It lingers, in footsteps, in breath, in the soft hum of the morning. You walk away knowing this sound isn't history. It's prophecy. You drift further north, where the music softens and words take center stage. The buildings seem quieter here, as if listening. Somewhere above you, a typewriter clacks steadily against the night, the percussion of thought. You follow the sound until it leads you to a narrow apartment glowing faintly from within. Inside, a man leans over his desk, cigarette smoke curling around his head like a halo. His name is Langston Hughes. He's young, restless, and poor, but his words are gold spun from grit. You watch him tap out lines that seem to rise straight from the city itself. What happens to a dream deferred? The question lingers, trembling, like a chord left unresolved. You can feel it vibrating through the walls, down the hallway, into the street below, where the dream itself, Harlem, keeps shifting between promise and heartbreak. Across the street, in another apartment, Claude McKay sits by the window. He's not writing about hope tonight, but rage, a disciplined, simmering defiance. "If we must die, let it not be like hogs," he once wrote, and you can still feel the echo of those words ricocheting through the room. Poetry here isn't a hobby, it's armor. It's resistance carved into rhythm. The two poets might never share a desk, but together, their words define an era. Hughes, with his blues-inspired tenderness. McKay, with his clenched fist formalism. Two voices arguing in harmony, like trumpet and bass, different notes, same song. A mainstream fact slips in like a whisper. In 1926, the Crisis magazine and Opportunity hosted poetry contests that helped launch these writers' careers, giving Harlem's voices a national audience. For the first time, black poetry wasn't hidden in backrooms or barbershops. It was printed, distributed, debated. The written word had become an instrument, as sharp and vital as any horn. You sit by the window, watching the poets' rooms flicker with lamplight. The city outside murmurs, carriages, laughter, faraway saxophones. A young woman walks by humming a blues tune that seems to weave itself into the verses being written above. And suddenly you realize, Harlem itself is one long poem, constantly rewriting its own rhythm. A fringe tidbit: Hughes used to drop his poems anonymously beside diners' tables, just to see if people would react. Sometimes they'd nod or smile, not knowing who the words belonged to. He said it helped him learn whether a line could breathe on its own, without the poet's name to carry it. Historians still argue whether the Harlem poets were trying to bridge worlds, bringing black experience to white readers, or simply writing to preserve the language of their own streets. But standing here, in this gentle glow of words and smoke, it doesn't feel like translation. It feels like testimony. You imagine yourself sitting across from Hughes as he leans back in his chair, grinning faintly. "It's all music," he says. "The words, the rhythm, the silence in between, it's all the same tune." He taps his fingers on the table, a small improvisation. The line between poet and musician blurs until it disappears. Outside, a thin mist begins to form, softening the city edges. You walk again, the typewriter keys echoing in your ears. Around you, the buildings seem to hum quietly with verses unsaid. Harlem is dreaming aloud, each window a stanza, each streetlight a comma. And as you pass an open bookstore window, a gust of wind flips a page to a fresh poem, ink still drying. The words dance for a second before settling. You don't read them, but you feel their rhythm settle deep inside you, steady, patient, alive. The poets will die someday, their rooms emptied, their papers yellowed. But their words, they'll keep walking these streets long after the jazz fades. You know this because, somehow, you can already hear them whispering through the night. The night slides on like a brushstroke, and now you find yourself surrounded by color. The music and poetry linger in the air, but here the story turns visual. You're inside a small gallery on 135th Street, walls crowded with canvases that hum like the city itself. The scent of turpentine mixes with perfume and cigar smoke. People murmur, not in hushed tones but with an excited buzz, the sound of a community seeing itself, truly, for the first time. On the far wall, a painting by Aaron Douglas stops you cold. Broad silhouettes, layered shades of violet and bronze, radiating from a single point of light. It looks both ancient and futuristic, like Egyptian hieroglyphs rendered in jazz tempo. Figures stretch upward, arms outstretched, as if reaching for something just beyond the canvas. You can't tell if it's salvation, knowledge, or rhythm, maybe all three. Douglas called his style Afro-Cubism, though some said it was the visual language of the new Negro. Each stroke a manifesto, each beam of light a promise. His art doesn't just depict Harlem, it mythologizes it, turning ordinary scenes into spiritual geometry. A mainstream fact: the Harlem Renaissance was one of the first major American art movements led entirely by black creators. Galleries like the Harmon Foundation gave artists like Douglas, Palmer Hayden, and Augusta Savage a platform, though often with the uneasy condition of white patron approval. Still, they painted, sculpted, and carved their own stories, building a visual world where beauty wore black skin unapologetically. In the corner, you spot a photograph pinned to the wall, a portrait by James Van Der Zee. A couple poses in their parlor, dressed in finery, gazing directly at the camera with quiet confidence. Behind them, lace curtains, a polished piano, framed photographs of family. It's not glamour for glamour's sake, it's reclamation. A statement that says, we exist, we thrive, we matter. A fringe tidbit: Van Der Zee would sometimes hand-color his photos, adding soft blushes or golden halos around his subjects' faces, not out of vanity, but reverence. He wanted them to look the way they felt inside, radiant and alive. Historians still argue whether the Harlem artists were celebrating identity or protecting it, whether these depictions softened harsh realities or sharpened them. But as you move through the room, it's clear the question misses the point. These weren't just paintings and photographs. They were declarations, bold, loud, luminous, against centuries of invisibility. You linger before a sculpture by Augusta Savage, a bronze head tilted upward, eyes closed, lips almost smiling. The title reads Gammon. The child's face seems to hold an entire lineage of dreams, compressed into a single expression. Savage, one of the few women sculptors of her time, once said she wanted her work to capture the breath before hope. Looking at it now, you feel that pause, delicate, infinite. Outside, the night hums again. Harlem never sleeps, it just changes rhythm. You pass by a tailor's shop where fabric sways in the breeze, as if even the clothes are performing. Somewhere nearby, a group of young painters laugh over coffee, arguing about whether art should be political or beautiful. You suspect they already know the answer. In Harlem, it's always both. The city's walls become their gallery, murals, posters, hand-painted signs that blur the line between protest and poetry. You imagine the artists climbing ladders under moonlight, leaving color as a kind of rebellion. When you step back into the street, you realize something quietly profound. Harlem itself has become a canvas. The lamplight pools like paint. The passing shadows move like brushstrokes. Even the faces you pass carry the soft glow of creation. And as you walk away, the memory of those painted figures follows, still reaching, still glowing, still climbing toward that impossible, eternal light. You turn a corner, and the hum of paint and piano gives way to voices, not singing now, but thinking aloud. Harlem's heartbeat shifts tempo again. Inside a brownstone parlor lit by a single flickering lamp, the city's sharpest minds gather around a worn oak table. Coffee cups rattle beside stacks of books. Cigarette smoke curls upward, as if eavesdropping. This is no party, it's a salon, a battlefield made of words. At the head of the table sits W.B. Du Bois, dignified, deliberate, eyes burning with intellect. His tone is calm, but his words cut clean. Art must serve the race. It must lift us upward. He believes beauty is a weapon, and artists must wield it with purpose. Around him, the room hums in agreement, mostly. Then Alain Locke leans forward, smiling slightly, his voice smooth but firm. Yes, but art must also be free, he says. We cannot build a new identity by chaining our imagination to propaganda. The air thickens. You can almost hear the city pause outside the window, holding its breath for the verdict. You realize this is the intellectual core of the Harlem Renaissance, not the jazz clubs or galleries, but this very tension, freedom versus responsibility, beauty versus message. Historians still argue whether Du Bois or Locke had the clearer vision, but perhaps the truth lies in the friction itself, the spark born when purpose and passion collide. You lean back, letting the debate wash over you. Someone mentions Garvey and Pan-African pride. Another insists that Harlem isn't just a neighborhood but a mirror for the diaspora. Every sentence feels like it's chiseling a new self into being, a collective identity rebuilt in real time. A mainstream fact emerges like a soft trumpet note. In 1925, Locke edited The New Negro, an anthology that became the Renaissance's unofficial manifesto. It wasn't just a book, it was a blueprint. Inside were poems, essays, art, and declarations that challenged centuries of stereotypes. The world took notice. A fringe tidbit, some of these salons grew so intense that neighbors would knock on the walls, thinking a fight had broken out. In truth, they were listening to history being argued into existence. You watch as Langston Hughes, younger than the rest, sits quietly in the corner, absorbing every word. Later, he'll say the real education wasn't in college but in rooms like this, where artists, scholars, and dreamers taught each other how to build worlds. Someone quotes Nietzsche, someone else counters with the blues. The debate dances the way jazz does, improvising, challenging, returning. Every point leads to another riff, another revelation. Then Du Bois stands again, looking out the window toward the dim skyline. "We are not a fad," he says quietly. "We are the new dawn." The words hang in the air, heavy and tender at once. For a moment, no one speaks. Even the street outside seems to listen. You imagine the scene as if painted by Aaron Douglas, abstract, radiant figures seated around a glowing center, each thought another beam of light stretching upward. The Renaissance wasn't just made of artists, it was built by arguments like these, passionate, imperfect, alive. As the group disperses, laughter replaces tension. Someone pours another round of coffee. Hughes helps a friend with her coat. Locke lingers at the door, murmuring something about a future too vast for the present to hold. You step outside with them, the air cool and steady. The night has shifted again. Less electric, more reflective. Harlem feels like a classroom where the lesson never ends, and every street corner is a syllabus written in jazz and ink. You walk on, the echo of their words mixing with distant piano notes, thinking how revolutions rarely start with riots. Sometimes, they start with conversation. You wander deeper into the pulse of Harlem, and the rhythm changes once more. This time it carries a different kind of power. Laughter rings out from an upstairs window, followed by the low rumble of a blues record spinning somewhere in the dark. Tonight, the spotlight shifts to the women, the singers, writers, and dancers who gave the Renaissance its texture, its bite, its heat. You hear her before you see her, Bessie Smith, the Empress of the Blues. Her voice spills out of a gramophone in a nearby cafe, thick and golden, like honey poured over heartbreak. She sings about men who leave, bills that won't, and the way loneliness sounds when it learns to keep rhythm. The people inside sway without speaking. Her songs don't ask for sympathy, they demand respect. Across the street, another woman scribbles furiously in a notebook. Zora Neale Hurston, anthropologist, novelist, lightning storm in human form. She collects stories the way others collect coins, scraps of folklore, sermons, gossip, all polished into art. You imagine her voice, sly, rhythmic, full of Florida sunlight and Harlem sass. She laughs in a way that makes you think she's never once asked permission to exist. Hurston doesn't care for the academic squabbles of salons. She wants something wilder, to capture life as it's lived, spoken, and sung. Historians still argue whether her work was too playful, too vernacular, too bold, but Zora would just smile and say, "Too much for who?" A mainstream fact floats up like a verse. Hurston studied under Franz Boas at Columbia University, becoming one of the first black women trained as an anthropologist. She brought her field work into fiction, turning everyday black speech into literary melody. Through her, Harlem learned that culture wasn't just created in galleries, it bloomed in barbershops, kitchens, and back porches. Then, as if summoned by memory, a flash of feathers and sequins catches your eye. Josephine Baker, radiant, unstoppable, sweeps across an imaginary stage in your mind. Though she found her greatest fame in Paris, her spirit was born here, in the same restless Harlem energy. The newspapers called her scandalous, history calls her fearless. You can almost hear the roar of applause, the shimmer of light on her costume, the sound of barriers breaking. A fringe tidbit, Baker used to perform with her pet cheetah, Chiquita, who once jumped into the orchestra pit mid-song. Chaos ensued, but Josephine never missed a beat. That's Harlem energy in a nutshell. Even disaster knew how to dance. You pass a beauty parlor where women gossip over hairdryers, debating politics, poetry, and who wore the better hat to the Savoy. Don't underestimate these spaces, they're laboratories of revolution. Every curl, every joke, every whispered complaint adds another thread to the tapestry of self-definition. Inside a candlelit club, a young woman sings a slow, aching tune. Her name's lost to time, one of the countless voices never recorded. But her song fills the room as if the walls themselves are listening. You watch her close her eyes on the final note, and for a moment, Harlem stands still. These women aren't side notes, they are the melody. Without them, the Renaissance would have been all theory and rhythm but no soul. Their voices made it flesh, gave it laughter, gave it hips that could sway and hearts that could break. You think of them, Bessie, Zora, Josephine, and the countless others, not as muses but architects. Builders of worlds disguised as songs, jokes, stories. And you realize that the Renaissance wasn't just a movement. It was a mirror, finally held steady, reflecting women who had always been there, brilliant, unbothered, eternal. As you step back into the night, their voices linger like perfume, not fading, just changing shape. Somewhere, faintly, Bessie still sings, "I'm downhearted, but I'm free." And Harlem hums in reply. The streetlights fade into dawn, and the city exhales. Harlem, after the fever of night, looks softer, as if it's catching its breath between revolutions. The laughter, the saxophones, the clinking of glasses dissolve into the quiet hum of early morning. You walk past shuttered clubs and paper-strewn sidewalks, where yesterday's brilliance lies folded like discarded sheet music. But even in stillness, something endures, an idea, a question, a pulse that won't rest. You sense it in the air. What happens to the dream after the applause dies? Langston Hughes once wrote that a dream deferred might dry up like a raisin in the sun. Here, in the gray morning light, you feel that warning settle into the bones of the city. For every stage lit with brilliance, there are bills unpaid, rent due, opportunities blocked by doors that still refuse to open. Harlem's Renaissance burned bright, but like all fires, it consumed as much as it illuminated. A mainstream fact emerges like a flicker of neon through fog. By the mid-1930s, the Great Depression struck Harlem harder than most of America. Unemployment soared, and the promises of cultural freedom collided with the harsh math of survival. Even as art flourished, poverty deepened. The dream of a new Negro, confident, self-defined, unbreakable, began to waver under the weight of economic despair. Still, some refused to let the music end. Duke Ellington kept his orchestra alive, even when ticket sales fell. Writers like Hughes turned their poems into protest, fusing beauty with resistance. In the smoky basements of Harlem, creativity became defiance, art as endurance, art as rebellion. You wander toward 135th Street, where the Schomburg collection of black culture stands, born from one man's relentless belief that history itself was a kind of power. Arturo Schomburg, a Puerto Rican of African descent, spent his life gathering books, letters, and artifacts to prove one truth, that black people had shaped civilization from the very beginning. His archive, once dismissed as obsessive, now forms one of the world's greatest repositories of African diaspora history. A small, poetic irony lingers here. Harlem's greatest revolution wasn't just in its music or art, but in its memory. It turned history into resistance. And yet, as the Renaissance dimmed, something else began to grow in its shadow, a deeper, quieter strength. The artists of Harlem had laid the foundation for movements yet to come: the civil rights struggle, Black Power, the global currents of identity and pride. You realize now that Harlem's story was never meant to end neatly. It was a seed, carried forward on rhythm and breath. You pass a child sitting on a stoop, sketching in a notebook. His pencil scratches across the paper, quick and certain. He doesn't know it yet, but he's drawing his inheritance, the freedom to imagine himself into being. Around him, the city hums, buses, street vendors, preachers warming up for another day. Harlem wakes again, not to repeat itself, but to remember. A fringe whisper of history drifts through your thoughts. In the late 1920s, a rumor circulated that the Renaissance would spread across the entire nation, that every black neighborhood from Chicago to New Orleans would bloom with its own poets, painters, and philosophers. In a way it did. The energy of Harlem leaked through train lines and jazz tours, through letters and dreams, until the entire cultural landscape of America shifted. Harlem was never just a place, it was an idea that moved. You stop in front of an old mural, chipped, faded, but still vibrant in its defiance. Painted across it are the words: "We were never just surviving. We were building the language of forever." And suddenly, it all becomes clear. The Harlem Renaissance wasn't a moment. It was a mirror, one that dared to show the world what freedom looked like when it learned how to dance. You breathe in, and the scent of coffee, ink, and memory fills your lungs. The city feels alive again, and you realize the Renaissance never really ended. It just changed form. In every beat of hip-hop, every mural, every poem that refuses to stay quiet, Harlem still whispers, still sings, still burns. And as the sun rises over the brownstones, you hear it one last time. Chorus, distant but clear, sing, "We dreamed ourselves into being, and we're not done yet." You move now beyond the familiar streets, past Lenox and 135th, past the clubs and galleries that held the Renaissance in their palms, and you notice something remarkable. Harlem's energy is contagious. It spills outward like sunlight bouncing off water. Chicago, Paris, the Caribbean islands. Everywhere black communities felt the tremor of possibility. Harlem didn't stay contained within its brownstone borders. It leapt, carrying ideas like jazz notes, poetry, and rhythm across the globe. You pause at a small cafe in Paris, not that you're really there, but in your mind's eye, you're watching Josephine Baker dance under glittering lights. Her banana skirt sways, and the crowd cheers, a white Parisian audience transfixed. Yet her performance is a statement, a challenge, a revolution in miniature. Black excellence, unapologetic, uncontainable. You realize then that the Renaissance had already begun traveling beyond Harlem streets, reshaping perceptions and lives halfway across the world. You follow the path to Chicago, where the South Side echoes with blues and poetry inspired by the same rhythms you heard uptown. Musicians and writers carry the Harlem blueprint: improvisation, defiance, style, intellect. Even small-town gatherings hum with this influence. The ripple effect is undeniable, a testament to a movement whose boundaries were never merely geographic. A mainstream fact surfaces in your sleepy mind. By the late 1920s, artists like Count T. Cullen and artists associated with the Harlem Renaissance had readings and exhibitions across Europe and America, connecting diasporic communities to one another and creating a cultural network unprecedented in scale. Harlem was no longer just a neighborhood, it had become a nexus of Black consciousness. Fringe tidbit: some travelers claimed that visiting Harlem gave them supercharged dreams. Artists returning home swore their palettes glowed differently, their words flowed faster, and their music gained a swing that wasn't there before. Whether that was poetic exaggeration or something more mystical, you can't help but sense a strange energy lingering in these streets, a spark that refuses to die. Historians still argue whether Harlem's influence was immediate or gradual, local or global, but for you, it feels instantaneous. You walk past buildings, remembering the jazz, the poetry, the murals, the debates. The city hums like a battery, feeding itself into the wider world. You notice the subtle footprints of Black intellectuals abroad. W.E.B. Du Bois delivers lectures in Europe. Alain Locke's ideas inspire classrooms and debates. Harlem becomes a symbol of possibility, an example that culture, identity, and intellect can thrive even in the shadow of systemic oppression. Back in Harlem, the streets seem calmer now, as if reflecting on their own history. Children play where rent parties once raged. Shopkeepers sweep steps once lined with impromptu galleries. Music leaks softly from open windows, not quite jazz, not quite blues, but an echo of both. Harlem has changed, but its pulse is the same. Persistent, resilient, eternal. You realize that the Renaissance's global migration is not merely about art or fame. It's about a blueprint for liberation, how communities take culture and transform it into power, influence, and identity. Harlem became the first note in a symphony that still plays today, a tune that refuses to stay in one place or time. And as the sun lifts higher, gilding the edges of the brownstones, you feel the city's heartbeat beneath your feet. The Renaissance has traveled far, yet it began here. In these streets you walk, under the same night sky, tracing the echoes of those who refuse to stay silent. Time drifts forward, and now the air is heavier with history's weight. The euphoria of Harlem's nights has collided with reality. The Great Depression has arrived like a sudden, uninvited guest. You feel it in the streets: fewer crowds, shuttered businesses, weary faces. Yet the pulse of Harlem does not die. It changes rhythm. It learns restraint without surrender. You notice the empty chairs in formerly bustling jazz clubs. Yet inside a dimly lit basement, a few musicians remain, coaxing music from battered instruments. You hear Ellington's piano keys, still triumphant, still defiant. Even when audiences thin, the art persists. A stubborn proof that creativity can outlast circumstance. Writers and poets face their own trials. Langston Hughes turns to protest poetry, painting the everyday struggles of Black workers, tenants, and dreamers. He writes in rhythm with Harlem's struggle, capturing voices that might otherwise vanish. Each poem is a testament, each essay a lifeline. Scholars still debate whether the artistic energy of this era faded or simply transformed. Some argue it became more political, others claim it only gained depth. You walk along the avenues and feel both sides. A mainstream fact: By 1933, unemployment among Harlem's black residents had skyrocketed, reaching nearly 50%. Yet, even as economic despair tightened its grip, art continued to flow. Poetry readings, music, and community gatherings kept the heartbeat alive. The dream deferred, yes, but not denied. Fringe tidbit: during the worst years, some landlords reportedly held secret rent parties in empty apartments, inviting tenants to play music or dance, paying what they could to stay afloat. These clandestine acts weren't just survival, they were defiance, a way to claim space in a world eager to erase it. You pass a shuttered gallery where Douglas once displayed his vibrant silhouettes. The walls are gray, chipped, yet you can almost see the colors shimmer as if memory itself refuses decay. Harlem's legacy isn't only in what's alive, it's in what refuses to vanish, in what survives the storm. You sense the Renaissance scattering, artists moving to Chicago, New York's downtown, even abroad. But Harlem remains, the seedbed of innovation, the blueprint of cultural defiance. Every performance, poem, painting, and debate feeds a continuity that will ripple forward. You realize that decline is not erasure, it's transformation. Outside, the morning feels heavy, almost suffocating. Yet there's a quiet beauty here, in the tenacity, in the refusal to vanish. Children chase each other down cracked sidewalks. Street vendors call out their wares with practiced rhythm. And you understand that the Renaissance's glow hasn't extinguished, it has folded into the city's DNA, waiting for the world to rediscover it. As you stop at the corner of 125th Street, you watch the light fall across the brownstones. Shadows stretch long and soft. Harlem has lost some battles, but it has won the war of essence. Identity, creativity, and dignity remain alive here. The city exhales as if saying, "We have endured. We continue. We persist." And you, walking quietly through the streets, sense that persistence, the echo of every note, every word, every brushstroke, coursing beneath your feet, steady, unyielding, eternal. The sun climbs higher now, spilling pale gold across Harlem streets. The night's music has faded into memory, the poetry and laughter folded into the air like smoke that never fully disappears. You walk slowly, feeling the weight of what has passed, and yet, the city is far from still. It breathes, steady and patient, as if aware of its own legacy. You pass a newsstand displaying old magazines and books, the printed record of the Renaissance. Covers worn, pages yellowed, but the words inside continue to pulse with life. You pick one up almost unconsciously, thumbing through essays by Alain Locke, poems by Count T. Cullen, and stories by Zora Neale Hurston. Each page whispers across time, bridging the distance between past and present. You feel their voices brush against your skin like a gentle wind, intimate and alive. A mainstream fact enters your mind. The Harlem Renaissance officially spans roughly from 1918 to the mid-1930s, yet its influence far outlived that window, seeding jazz, literature, visual art, and political thought for generations. It was never confined to a decade. It was a movement, a spark, a revolution, a heartbeat. You turn a corner and see a mural, faded but indelible, depicting dancers, musicians, and poets in eternal motion. Even the chipped paint seems to vibrate in rhythm with the city's soul. Harlem never truly sleeps. Its story is layered, each era a note added to the city's ongoing symphony. A fringe tidbit: some locals believed that if you walked certain streets at dawn, you could hear the faint echo of old jazz notes in the wind, as if the city itself retained memory in a frequency just beyond ordinary perception. Tonight you swear you can. Historians still argue whether the Renaissance's most important contribution was artistic or social, aesthetic or political. Standing here, it doesn't matter. The art, the words, the music, they all converge to tell the same story, that a community, through imagination, defiance, and sheer persistence, claimed its own identity in the world. Children run past you now, their laughter mingling with the distant hum of a streetcar. Somewhere, a woman tunes a piano, and a young man whistles a melody reminiscent of a distant saxophone. Harlem has endured cycles of hope, despair, brilliance, and struggle, yet it remains alive, teaching, inspiring, carrying forward the Renaissance's legacy without fanfare or announcement. You pause at the steps of a brownstone, breathing in the scents of coffee, bread, and city air. The sky softens to pastel, a quiet reminder that even endings are gentle. You realize Harlem's true gift was more than music or literature. It was the revelation that creativity could survive, thrive, and redefine reality. As you turn away, the city seems to murmur, "We dreamed, we dared, we became. And in our becoming, we remain." You carry that pulse with you, the rhythm of resilience echoing softly through your own heartbeat. Harlem lives in memory, in sound, in color, in thought, eternal, unbroken, endlessly awake. You settle onto a stoop, the city quieting around you. The night has gone, the sun now spilling soft light across brick and brownstone, and yet Harlem hums, gently, beneath the surface. The echoes of jazz and poetry drift faintly in your mind, but they are no longer urgent. They are tender, like a memory unfolding slowly, deliberately, so you can savor every note. You notice the lamplight reflecting in puddles from last night's rain, small mirrors holding the sky and the city in fragile balance. The sound of distant footsteps, a bird calling, a door closing softly, all of it blends into a lullaby composed by the streets themselves. Here, the bustle of Harlem is replaced by a rhythm that is slow, deliberate, and soothing, reminding you that the city's story does not end with headlines or history books. It lives in its quiet corners, in whispered conversations, in footsteps that carry yesterday into tomorrow. You think of the artists, writers, musicians, and thinkers who walked these streets before you, their laughter, their arguments, their melodies still hanging in the air. You can almost feel their presence as a gentle current beneath your fingers when you trace the edges of the worn stoop. The city seems to breathe with them, a collective exhale that stretches across time. Every shadow softens, every color mellows. The hustle and chaos of the Renaissance transforms in your mind into something more intimate, more meditative. The murals, the photographs, the poems, they are no longer artifacts to study, but companions guiding you into calm. The movement that once roared with exuberance now whispers in soft tones, teaching patience, resilience, and quiet joy. You close your eyes, letting the rhythm of Harlem fold into your breath. The music, the words, the laughter, and even the struggle, all dissolve into a gentle, sustaining pulse. You feel carried by it as if the city itself rocks you slowly, deliberately toward rest. Harlem has taught you something tender tonight. History isn't only events. It is sensation, it is echo, it is the living, breathing memory of people daring to dream. And as you drift further into stillness, the city murmurs its final note, soft and reassuring, promising continuity, legacy, and calm.